Hello, Phalonians. I'm Lore Master Matt.
And I'm Phalon John.
And welcome to the Bellringers. From time to time, we're going to record a series on a special topic, and you'll find that in these sessions, the Bellringers. The Lord Mayor of Teradim, Varain Qualtara, employs many young people, generally waifs and strays like John and I, to roam throughout Teradim, ringing a bell and shouting proclamations from the Lord Mayor or the news of the day. Besides a daily stipend, Bellringers are often stopped on the streets by the affluent of Teradim and asked to give the news to them personally, for which they receive a copper or two for their time. We are your Bellringers, and today the news is a starting point for lore and your journey through the world of Phalon. So last time we started talking about each of the different factions, John, and their place in the world, their governments, their histories, and we've done Falkar. And we decided we'd move on to something, so I got to talk a little bit.
Did we decide that, Matt?
Well, I did. What I figured was, hearing my voice for a little while would get boring, and then yours.
I'm cool with that.
Go back and forth. But so our topic for today is Kuzaarl, the Kuzaaric people, our analog to shorter folk. So today we want to talk about the history and the government of Kuzaarl.
Which first? History, government. What do you want to do? History.
Oh, history.
History,
yeah,
go.
Let's go with the history.
Speed round, go.
No. I'm not speeding anywhere today. So the Kuzaaric have a fascinating history. And it's a little different than, say, last week where we talked about Falkar, where they were the Phalar people and what we know is the Urdagar. And a group of them decided to break off.
They didn't migrate.
South.
Right? They're from there.
They're from there,
yeah.
Right? Which I just love. And we're going to get to tell that story someday, and I'm so excited about that. But the Kuzaaric, as far as they know, and as far as everybody else knows, have always been in the Northern Mountains. And they are but a shadow of their former self, which makes them a kind of a tragic and very desperate people, maybe even more so than we've really written about, because there's not many of them left. At one point, there was a confederation of Kuzaaric city-states spread across the Northern Mountains and in some other places. And then all of that kind of came to a stop, and that's what we really want to talk about today with their history. So there were at one point 9 city-states, each with their own king. Early on, something that we haven't talked about yet, and you notice 9 again, of course, our holy number, right? The Kuzaaric are Gaul worshippers.
Directly.
Right.
They don't divide the creator into aspects.
They don't. They're
further divided.
Further divided. They're straight Gaul worshippers, and we're going to talk about that next time. But 9 city-states, 9 Gaul. There's a reason, obviously, for that. Early on, lost to the annals of history and probably only known to very few Kuzaaric. 2 of those city-states were cast out. Their names are forgotten. They're just gone.
And we get to tell why later.
Yes, which is always fun.
Yep.
Which left 7 of them. And for a long time, even a little past the point where the Falkar and the Urdagar are starting to go back into their lands and taken back from the Trazarites, there is this great Kuzaaric confederation in the Northern Mountains. 7 different city-states. Frostreach up on the northern ice shelf, Emerald Bluff in the east, situated in a beautiful green valley, Woodspire in the far east, which is around a large...
I love how you know where they are. If I looked at the list of the names of the Kuzaaric city-states, I would have to really sit here and burn my brain as to which one's which. He's just rolling off his tongue.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
I love the Kuzaaric.
They're
my babies.
They're to be loved. So, awesome.
Woodspire is out in the east on the edge of a huge forest. Vinyabagorod, which is the sole existing Kuzaaric, the Sky City, Kuzaaric city-state, kind of in the center of things. Creator's Throne up in the Northern Mountains, which sat across 3 beautiful high peaks. Shadow Crag, which was a great mining city, and Nine Falls in the west, which sat in a caldera with a glacier melting behind it with Nine Falls. Right. So these beautiful cities, and at some point, catastrophe strikes this confederation. Things start to go sour, and we've always talked a little bit about, and you'll read in the lore, that the thermal vents that the Kuzaarl used to heat their cities, to power their cities, to run their forges and all of these things.
Grow their food?
Yes, grow their food, absolutely. Emerald Bluff is a green valley because of the thermal vent that runs underneath it. Yeah. They start to go cold very suddenly. The plasma or the lava conduits underneath that are running these huge volcanoes in the north, they shift, which they do naturally, but whether or not that was a natural occurrence or not, that's something we'll explore.
Another story we will tell later.
Yeah. So the thermal vents start to cool, and those cities that are experiencing that obviously can't hold out. They can't survive, so they start to migrate to other cities. So you've got a really terrible refugee problem. And then in the east, there's a conflict with the Trillians, which topples Woodspire, and that really just compounds the problem. And then, unfortunately, in the west at Nine Falls, you have a civil war amongst the Kuzaarl, the military versus the more creative aspects, safety over freedom and that sort of thing. And that city topples as well. Shadowcrag just disappears from the map. It's not gone, but nobody hears anything from it, and they're just not there. So there's a lot of different things that happen at about the same time. There's
all bad,
right? A refugee problem as they come tripping into
the surviving cities that still have warmth, still have heat.
Yeah, and it all just dominoes. And at the end of it all, you have Vinyavagarad, Sky City, on its own, sporting countless numbers of refugees. Illnesses creep in, it decimates the population, and the king at the time decides that to save his people, to save the Kuzaarl people, that they're going to have to strip everything away and just take over and foster what's left. And it's a Sovietization of the country, as far as what we would look at it as. But to that king, it was a very tragic moment where it was preserve the freedom of his people and the ideals of the city-state confederation, or die. And of course, they chose to live. And so we have this set of rules that the Kuzaarl called the long way, because they knew it would be a long time before they could resurge as a people, as a culture, that that governs all of the Kuzaarl people, all of the Sky City. And that creates things like the PDC, the Prejudicial Diplomatic Corps, that kind of looks after the culture and the people and makes sure everybody's pulling their weight and working and doing what they're supposed to do. It is the most, that's before my time, right? I have written a ton of Kuzaarl lore, but that is before my time, and whoever came up with that,
John Becker,
freaking brilliant.
Yeah, an original member of the company back in the day, way back in the day.
Yeah,
all freelance play testers, wanted to have our own company. And he did some great stuff.
He did some amazing work. It was a beautiful foundation that the Kuzaarl had that I've been able to build on. So everybody stands on the shoulders of giants, and that was definitely the case there. So you've got the PDC that's created by that. You have the industrial unions. The government basically takes control over all mining, forestry, all the trades, and they bring them into the government, into a council, a high council, and give them a say. And they are, directly elected by the people, but it's definitely a controlled situation, and it's meant to keep everybody working towards a common goal of surviving at first and then building back up to where they can eventually thrive again. And it's really fun for me because that's where we find them, is in the middle of that story. We don't find them on the resurgence side. We don't find them on the well, gosh, we're retaking the Confederation.
There's steps between now and then, right?
They're still very much in the we're hanging by a thread, and a misstep could cost us our people.
Yep.
And I love that bit of story. The other thing about the Kuzaarl is they are a militaristic people. They have to be. because again, any one threat could wipe them out. So you have a lot of different threats in that neck of the woods. You have the Ruin tribes of the Urtigar, and the other ones, but the Ruin are
the environment.
The environment, yeah. I mean, it's an Arctic wasteland and the mountains, you know. So there's all these different enemies that they have. So everybody serves, right? You know, we've talked before about having a Kuzaarl child base. You know, 3 of them. And you know, in my headcanon, which is about to be official here,
not too young,
not too not too young, but you know,
young Kuzaarl defending the last corridor of the Sky City. Yeah.
You know, young Kuzaarl are brought up in a militaristic way. They're brought up in a militaristic mindset, and I can see, you know, like in some of the frontier cities, especially, you know, the smaller towns and villages that are herding and things like that, where you know, young teenage Kuzaarl, or their equivalent to teenage, are going out with their parents to learn the trade, learn militaristic ways, and then they have a term of forced service that the government demands, and then they stay on ready for the rest of their lives, because at any moment the Urtigar raid comes over the hill that's going to just wipe everything out, and you have to be able to blow the horn and get everybody there, and they're already equipped and ready to go. So it's kind of a bleak outlook.
Oh yeah.
It's a bleak society.
Bleak outlook for a bleak place on the map.
It is, and the government is one that we would turn our noses up at. For the most part.
Yeah, but we're not in those circumstances.
So, and you know, you hope that the High King and the council know how tragic it is that this has had to happen. The first one that instituted the Long Way certainly did, but that's part of the story too, right? Because
I'll be like, this just seems normal. Let's just leave it this way.
This is just fun, right?
Yeah.
I'm in control.
Who does that? Yeah.
Who does that? Who does that? So that is the Kuzaarl history and government kind of wrapped into one, because really they're the same story.
Right.
They come out of that same catastrophe, that same tragedy of their
way of governing themselves is because of their history directly.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And you know, there may be a time in the future where that changes, but we're a ways off from that yet.
But you have to stay with us for that, dear listener.
Oh, you will, because that's going to be
the story's going to be told. Sure.
Yeah. So next time we're going to talk about the military itself and their religion. Both are very interesting, very different in the world of Phelan. So stick with us, folks.
I do want to add one thing.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about the origin, the prejudicial diplomatic corps being a term that came from before, and the baseline of the story. And I said John's name. I think Richard Lonsky also very significantly involved in that writing from that time period.
Right.
John was heavily involved with the chakra.
Oh, okay.
And so
he did a great job with those too.
He did. Right. And I was just looking at some stuff of his the other day, so that name was right in my mind. But I just want to give credit where credit's due.
Absolutely.
Pretty sure Rich was significantly involved in the development of the early Kuzaarl, and because what I had on the map when I was a kid, that spot was ice people. I had decided when we decided the company was going to use Phelan as their baseline. We picked what we were going to put there, and I believe Rich had the lead in terms of telling the story.
Awesome.
So that's where that comes from.
Very cool. So tune in next time, folks, and we'll talk about their military and their religion. And until next time, we'll see you around the table.
Sil Sakaba.